In the last video, part 3D of the series, we wrapped up shooting of the annual qualification in the form of the field firing exercises. In this video, we'll...
Hello and welcome to Bloke on the British Muzzleloaders Range. Now today we're going to talk about everybody's favourite SMLE related topic, the Mad Minute. Now for those who are unaware, the Mad Minute was an exercise where soldiers had to fire as many rounds as possible into a 12-inch target at 300 yards in 1 minute.
What? No, it isn't. At all.
Okay then, but here it says quite clearly that Mad Minute was a pre-World War I term used by British Army riflemen during training at the Hythe School of Musketry to describe scoring a minimum of 15 hits onto a 12-inch round target at 300 yards within 1 minute using a bolt-action rifle, usually a Lee Enfield or a Lee Metford rifle. It was not uncommon during the First World War for riflemen to greatly exceed this score.
No, not that either.
Okay, so how about this one then? Ever heard of a Mad Minute? A skilled British infantryman in the trenches of World War I France reportedly could get 60 shots off in as many seconds with his bolt-action Lee Enfield rifle. The Kaiser soldiers thought at first that they were facing machine guns.
No.
How about this one? The Mad Minute. Marksmanship training in the British Army involved an exercise known as the Mad Minute, in which a soldier was expected to fire at and hit a 12-inch target at 300 yards out at least 15 times.
No.
A trained rifleman could hit the target 30 plus times with his short magazine Lee Enfield.
No.
At the turn of the century, the British Army was the most professional in the world, with each soldier trained to be an expert marksman.
No.
During the musketry classification shoots of recruits, there were 3 stages, one being the Mad Minute. Shot at various ranges, if this was completed with a high enough score, the soldier would be classified a marksman and given a Cross Rifles badge and a 6p a day increase in pay, so it paid to be a good shot.
No.
Yeah, but...
No.
Yeah, but...
Just stop.
Yeah, but on the internet...
Stop.
But...
No. Stop.
Here it says, on average a rifleman could fire 25 shots, and some could even make it to 40 shots.
When the series began in Part 1, the stated aim was to conduct a detailed examination of the realities of musketry of the BEF in 1914. The foundation of any discussion of the BEF's performance in 1914 will always begin with an examination of its infantry firepower. While understanding the tactical superiority that was at times exhibited by the BEF, it was also important to complement the legend of a rapier amongst size with a healthy and in-depth look at how the British Army was actually trained. One does not have to search very far to uncover all sorts of claims and anecdotes that purport a near superhuman ability to deliver fire with the SMLE. Examples of this were given in the opening sequence, and there are many, many more. In this video, we'll break down these claims and determine what is truth and what is fiction, while also placing in the proper context that miscredited, misused, and misunderstood feat known as the Mad Minute.
We'd hardly got our head covered before the ridge, about 3/4 of a mile away, was literally swarming with Germans in their field grey uniforms. And they advanced, and we would receive the order to rapid fire.
10 rounds, rapid fire!
We rapid fired at 15 rounds a minute at these advancing Germans, and they broke up into smaller groups of 6 or 8, advancing through the cornfield where the corn was in stooks.
A voice from the past describes the effect of rapid fire. The BEF of 1914 could shoot. That fact has become the cornerstone of the discussion of its effectiveness in the opening battles of 1914. From the initial contacts with the German First Army in the close country at Mons, through the wide open spaces at Le Cateau, to the battles around Ypres in November, this capability was one that often decided the day. But the men of the BEF weren't supermen, nor were they all expert marksmen. They were generally, however, effective marksmen, trained in battlefield musketry. The reality of British musketry in 1914 has been described and demonstrated in the preceding videos of the series. If you are looking for the reality of musketry training, and resultingly the capabilities of the average infantryman, you need not look any further. After viewing them, I'm sure you'd agree that for the most part, the practices and schemes contained therein were comprehensive, but not exceptionally difficult. I can attest that I am what I'd call a competent shot, but certainly not a great one, and I was able to achieve a score that entitled me to the status of marksman. So that's the reality of it. British soldiers did not spend countless hours with piles of ammunition getting practice in to get up to 30 rounds a minute. They paraded with their company on the range and shot the annual qualification over a period of many days, just as I did. The figures quoted in Part 3C of the series show just how well they did against this standard. So why has this notion of the mad minute become so pervasive and wildly misinterpreted? The examination begins here. With just a few minutes of cursory research on a computer, you can come up with any number of answers to the question, what was the mad minute? Some are indeed partially accurate, while others are complete rubbish. Was it where British soldiers fired 30 rounds a minute? Was it a requirement in which the soldier had to shoot 15 rounds at 300 yards in 1 minute? Was it a competition to see who could fire the most rounds in a minute? Did everybody shoot this? Was it a reference to the so-called world record of 38 rounds a minute into a 12-inch target at 300 yards? The answer to all of these questions posed is no. But if it's not any of these, then what is it? Upon examination of the facts and anecdotes, one can see two distinct instances where the term mad minute could be applied. Either as part of the soldier's skill set as he trained to and executed during his annual qualification, or as a standalone feat of arms conducted by select individuals. These two examples should be understood as being separate instances, and chaos will reign supreme if their details are confused with each other. Like all good historical examinations, it's best to start with the facts. Now, there is no doubt that rapid shooting in the army of the post-Boer War era was a heavily emphasized area of training. As already mentioned, it was compelled by the experience of being on the receiving end of the quick-firing Boers, and the institutionally directed refusal to increase the number of machine guns in the infantry. Much time was spent developing the necessary skills, and there was no doubt that the BEF were the best shooting of the armies that clashed in 1914. The term mad minute has in recent times become so misunderstood that it's impossible to decipher what it really was without dissecting the history. Let's start with what lies at the foundation of the whole thing. The complete annual qualification contained 5 rapid practices at 200, 300, and 500 yards. Practice 9 consisted of 5 rounds. Practice 11, 10 rounds. Practice 13, 5 rounds. Practice 22, 15 rounds. And practice 24, 5 rounds. Of these, one practice in particular combined the most number of rounds at a decent though not long range, and of course the 1 minute time constraint. This was of course practice 22. I believe it goes without saying that this practice is the mad minute incarnate. So we can leave it at that then. Or can we? There is only one aspect of this practice that is irrefutable. That is the range. There are aspects, however, that need clarifying, for they are often misunderstood. First, the target. The target, as demonstrated throughout the series, was the second-class figure target, which was 4 foot square and had at its center a number 5 figure. Most often, the exercise is described as being shot at or into a 12-inch target. As stated and demonstrated, there is no such target used in this or any other practice. The confusion arises when the dimension of the number 5 is applied to the whole. The figure 5 represented the head and cap of a man behind cover and was 12 inches in height and 12 inches across its bottom. As part of the second-class figure target as used in Practice 22, it was only an aiming mark. Scoring for this practice is detailed in Part 3C of the series. The next aspect to clarify is the number of rounds. The reality and most examples cite 15 as being the number. This is correct. Often, however, a caveat is added stating that either the practice involves shooting at least 15 rounds or that some could shoot more. This is patently false. The man was given 15 to shoot, no more. So greater scores or inflated numbers of rounds were not possible. This leads to an interesting aspect as it pertains to any requirement to shoot 15. Simply stated, there wasn't. To start, in the general description of rapid fire found in the text of the Musketry Regulations of 1914, it states the following. In rapid firing, a man of normal temperament should be able to attain the regulation rate with trifling loss of accuracy. But it is not desirable to make a great sacrifice of accuracy to produce even the regulation rate. Dexterity in loading and a habit of rapid alignment of the sights should be developed in preliminary training. In the range practices, the opportunity is afforded to every man to ascertain his own best rate for combining accuracy in shooting with rapidity of fire so as to produce a high average of hits per minute. But there is no obligation to fire all the rounds allotted in any rapid practice. So this actually emphasizes within reason accuracy over speed, even if not all the rounds are fired in a given practice. Perhaps more specific is the scoring scheme used for this practice. I'll use my effort in Practice 22 as an example to illustrate the point. There was no requirement to shoot 15 rounds in a minute, as we'll explain. 15 rounds a minute was certainly the standard that was trained to, and remedial action was taken for those who could not achieve this. But was the figure of 15 rounds actually required? No. You see, the man's status as a marksman, first, second, or third class shot, and his proficiency pay was based on an aggregate score in Part 3 of the annual qualification, the classification practices, and not on one single practice in particular. Indeed, not every round need be fired in the 1 minute to still achieve a decent score. I achieved a score of 154 on the complete part, giving me the status of marksman, and notionally 6 pence a day in proficiency pay. Now let's make some modifications to my score. If I only shot 10 rounds in Practice 22, for whatever reason, and here I removed the 5 best hits from my target, the overall score would be reduced by 15 points, still within the marksman's category when combined as an aggregate score. To take this to the extreme, if I didn't shoot Practice 22 at all, or indeed missed the target completely with all 15 rounds, my score would be reduced by 42 points. Still, this would give me an overall score in Part 3 of 112. As you'll understand, this would put me conspicuously within the parameters for being a first-class shot, and as such, I would still be entitled to Class 1 proficiency pay. Although, of course, I would not be entitled to the marksman's badge, worn on the left lower sleeve. So although there are some explanations of the Mad Minute that are quite close in accuracy, the concept of requirement to shoot 15 rounds is not an accurate claim. So in the context of the British soldier, the Mad Minute would simply describe Practice 22 of his annual qualification. And as an extension in the field, he might have given them the Mad Minute, simply referring to a spate or period of rapid fire delivered at or near the standard of 15 rounds a minute. So that brings us to the end of Part 4A. In the next part, we'll examine the second version of the Mad Minute, that as a standalone feat of arms. Before we go, however, I invite you to take in an account written by little Jimmy Naylor, a boy trumpeter in the Royal Field Artillery, mentioned in Lynn MacDonald's 1914. If this passage doesn't illustrate the power of rapid fire delivered with the SMLE, then I don't know what does. He writes of his experiences in the opening weeks of the war. But one matchless moment was still to come. It came when things were going badly, when it was time for the guns to go, and to go fast if they were to escape being captured by the enemy. But the guns could not move until the limbers and horse teams came up to trail them away. It was Jimmy who had taken the order to the transport, waiting with the ammunition wagons in the shelter of the village a quarter of a mile away. Now he was back, breathless and excited, waiting for them to appear. The infantry had been pushed back. They were close in front now, firing on a mass of German soldiers whose ragged ranks faltered occasionally in their withering fire, and then surged on like an incoming tide. Behind the racket of the firing, Jimmy listened, fascinated, to the voice of their officer, steady and cool as any heroic character in one of his well-thumbed books. He was saying, "At 400, at 350, at 300. The rifles blazed, but still the Germans came on. They were getting nearer and nearer, and for the first time I began to feel rather anxious and frightened. They weren't an immediate mass anymore. You could actually pick out details, see them as individual men coming on and coming on. And the officer, still as cool as anything, was saying, "At 250, at 200. And then he said, "10 rounds, rapid!" And the chaps opened up, and the Germans just fell down like logs. I've never seen anything like it. The discipline, the fire discipline of those troops, I've never forgotten that. I was so impressed. As a boy of 16, I was simply astounded. I thought, what a marvelous army we have. The attack was completely repulsed, probably not for long, but it was long enough for us to get the guns away. It saved us. I'd like to say thank you to a very special friend of the channel, Mike from Bloke on the Range. Bloke on the Range is Mike's YouTube channel run out of Switzerland. His channel is full of all sorts of fascinating fact, wit, and predominantly, but not exclusively, old military firearms. Feel free to stop by. It's well worth the visit. Mike would be happy to see you. If you'd like to support the channel, please stop by our Patreon page. The link is in the description below.
I find the scripted stuff so hard. I love what you've done here. It's brilliant. Oh, bollocks. But here it says, he presses the off button. Hell. Come on. Wake up. No one will spot the whiskey just out of shot. You gonna work or what? Gee. The Mad Minute was an exercise whereby soldiers had to shoot. I've got the real thing in my head so much. Ah, shit. That's behind the rifle, doesn't matter. Into a 12-inch target at 300 meters, yards. Ah, crap. Bollocks. Ah, yes, I got through it. Try that twice more.